A luxurious gala breathes beneath towering crystal chandeliers, their fractured light scattering diamonds across polished marble. The orchestra's strings shimmer through the air, delicate, intentional, expensive. Every corner of the ballroom hums with wealth. You can feel it in the perfume, the posture, the way people hold their glasses like trophies instead of drinks. In the center of this glimmering world sits a black man, Darius Cole. Quiet, composed, still. His stillness is what draws the eyes first. Then his presence keeps them. The VIP section, elevated and roped off like royalty seating, was never meant for someone who looked like him, at least, not in their minds. Guests stare openly, some curious, many judgmental, all assuming. A ripple of cold tension spreads across the platform, and then it happens. A white couple slices through the crowd like heat seeking a target. The woman's sapphire gown flashes beneath the chandelier light, her face carved into annoyance. Her husband walks half a step behind her, chest puffed, jaw tight, posturing authority he believes he owns. They stop directly in front of Darius. The woman's voice cuts through the music before the orchestra even has time to soften for the next movement. "Get out of that seat right now. That's for VIPs, not for people like you." Gasps erupt like bursting glass. Phones freeze mid-air. Whispers bloom like smoke. The atmosphere shifts. Heavy, electric, shameful. The husband fumbles for his phone, already calling security, eager to remove the problem. The room holds its breath. Calm. Unshaken. Almost eerily composed. The kind of calm that doesn't come from weakness, but from knowing a truth the room hasn't learned yet. What they didn't know was that this nobody owned more of this party than anyone in that room. Stay with me. This story hits hard. And real quick, comment where you're watching from. Your city or country. All right, let's begin. It began moments earlier, when Darius stepped out of a sleek black SUV and into a world that wasn't built for him, but was funded by him. Inside, the Sapphire Ridge fundraiser glittered with all the predictable, polished arrogance of wealth. Walls draped in white roses, ice sculptures carved with precision. Guests floating from group to group, smiling too much and meaning too little. And then the shift. The second Darius entered, conversation stuttered, energy tightened, whispers flickered to life. He didn't need to look around to know. He'd grown up recognizing the silent question in people's eyes. How did you get here? Older guests paused to examine him like he'd wandered onto the wrong film set. A pair of young tech heirs snickered behind champagne flutes. Maybe he's the valet. Or security. Why else would he be dressed that well? But the servers, the only people in the room who lived between worlds, gave him small, knowing nods. That silent, shared understanding that comes from decades of being underestimated. Yet Darius walked with intentional ease. Not arrogant, assured. Not loud, present. The kind of presence that doesn't ask permission. He ascended to the VIP platform and approached Table 1, Seat 3, the highest-ranking placement in the entire event. His name glowed from a brushed metal plaque, polished to perfection under chandelier light. For a moment, the room went still. People stared, not because they recognized him, but because they didn't, and to them, unfamiliar meant unworthy. He lowered himself into the seat with the elegance of someone who belonged there long before anyone realized it, but entitlement never sits quietly. Across the ballroom, the white couple noticed him, their faces twisted instantly. Offended, territorial, indignant. Without a word between them, they began marching toward him with the confidence of people who had never been told no. Their steps were sharp. Their anger was loud. Their certainty was absolute. And yet, beneath all of it, something far bigger was unfolding. They were about to learn the most expensive lesson of their lives. The confrontation began long before the first word was spoken. Long before anger found volume and prejudice found its excuse. It started in the way the woman's heels clicked across the marble floor, each step sharper than the last, fueled not by curiosity, but by entitlement. She stopped directly in front of Darius, her shadow falling across his table like a curtain being drawn over a scene she didn't approve of. Her lips curved into a smile, thin, tight, rehearsed, the kind people wear when they believe they're about to correct a mistake that inconveniences them. "Stand up," she demanded quietly, but with a tone that carried through the VIP section like a warning. "That seat is reserved. You can't just wander into the VIP platform and help yourself." Darius didn't move. Didn't flinch. Didn't even blink. Her husband moved next, stepping forward with an exaggerated sigh. He positioned himself between Darius and the chair, claiming space with the ease of someone who'd never been denied it. "Look, man," he said, voice dripping with condescension, "you can't just sneak in here and pretend. This isn't general seating. This is for actual donors." Actual donors. The words dropped like stones into the silence around them. Darius reached calmly for the metal name plaque, lifting it just slightly to show his engraved name. His hand moved with deliberate gentleness, as if he already knew any sudden motion would be misinterpreted. But before the plaque even fully turned, the woman slapped his hand away. "Don't play games," she snapped. "You can't fake your way into the VIP section with a printed card. We know what we're doing. We've been to these events for years." Nearby guests froze in place. Forks suspended mid-air, champagne flutes hovering dangerously close to trembling fingers. Some stared in disbelief, but most looked away as quickly as possible. Pretending not to see was easier than admitting they'd witnessed something ugly. Because admitting it meant deciding whether to intervene, and no one wanted to risk losing their privilege for a stranger. Darius lowered the plaque back onto the table with the calm precision of someone placing a needle into a map. His movements stayed smooth, unthreatening, almost painfully respectful. His voice remained steady, untouched by their venom. "I believe you're mistaken," he said quietly. But mistaken wasn't a word the woman accepted. "Oh, please, spare us," she spat. "If you can't afford a ticket like everyone else, you don't get to steal someone's seat and hope nobody notices." Steal. Someone like you, and the coded language was no longer coded. The husband's patience snapped. He pulled out his phone. "That's it," he growled. "Security, now." He stepped back with a sense of triumph, already imagining how grateful the room would be once the problem was removed. He puffed out his chest, pacing in short, authoritative strides while the phone rang. The wife crossed her arms, satisfied. "Some people just don't understand boundaries," she muttered loudly enough for the entire platform to hear. Darius remained seated, still, grounded, a man who had survived much bigger humiliations than this, and who held far greater power than they could imagine. Guests continued pretending to be engrossed in conversations, though every ear tilted subtly toward the unfolding tension. The silence was no longer accidental, it was complicit. But calling security was the worst mistake they could have made. The moment security stepped onto the VIP platform, the music seemed to soften on instinct, as if the orchestra sensed a storm forming where elegance was supposed to reign. Two officers in tailored event uniforms approached. Professional, composed, and clearly confused by the call, because from a distance, nothing looked out of place. A well-dressed man sitting quietly at his assigned table, a couple standing over him, visibly agitated, guests watching with the kind of forced nonchalance used to mask fascination. But as the officers drew closer, the tension sharpened. The husband immediately launched into complaint mode, pointing aggressively at Darius. "Finally. This man is trespassing. He's pretending to be a VIP guest." The wife folded her arms with triumphant certainty. "He forged something to sit here. Just look at him. Obviously not supposed to be in this section." Security turned to Darius. Their eyes moved from his suit to his calm posture, then to the gold VIP badge resting neatly against his lapel. Their brows tightened, not in suspicion, but in confusion. One officer stepped forward respectfully. "Sir, can we see your credentials?" Darius didn't argue, didn't ask why, didn't demand fairness. He simply lifted the badge with 2 fingers, allowing the soft chandelier light to catch the embossed gold lettering. VIP Gold Access. Verified. The officers leaned in, examined it. Checked the embedded hologram. Ran the side barcode with a handheld scanner. A soft beep confirmed validity. And that was the moment the energy shifted. The husband's bravado faltered. The wife blinked hard, her confidence glitching. But embarrassment rarely admits defeat. It transforms. The woman leaned in, voice sharp. That means nothing. Anyone can copy a badge. He obviously printed it or stole it from someone. Look at him. Look at him. 3 words. Heavy. Calculated. Loaded with every assumption they refused to say outright. The guests nearby pretended not to hear, yet their eyes flickered with curiosity, and something uglier. A middle-aged man whispered, "Maybe he slipped in with the staff." Another murmured, "I mean, these events are impossible to monitor." Their voices were quiet, but their prejudice was deafening. Darius sat motionless. He didn't defend himself. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't plead for dignity. His silence wasn't surrender. It was strength, the kind that infuriates people who want a reaction. The husband grew louder, sensing control slipping. "Check again," he barked at the officers. "People forge things all the time. He doesn't belong here. Just remove him so we can move on." Security hesitated, not because they doubted Darius, but because removing him would please donors, and pleasing donors meant avoiding conflict with the wealthy couple glaring at them as if their reputation was being held hostage. One officer shifted uneasily. "Sir, his credentials appear valid." The wife snapped instantly. "Appear valid? You're not doing your job. Do you want us to speak to the event director?" "This is unacceptable." Her husband nodded aggressively. "Escort him out. We don't want trouble in the VIP area." Trouble. That word hung in the air like a threat, aimed not at a man misbehaving, but at a man simply existing in a place they believed he didn't deserve. Security exchanged looks, caught between truth and authority. The orchestra played on, unaware of the quiet humiliation spreading thick across the platform. And then, through the tension, from the far end of the ballroom, a voice cut through the noise, loud, warm, and unmistakably delighted. "Darius! You made it!" And then, someone unexpected called out Darius's name. The sound of that voice, warm, familiar, unmistakably authoritative, cut through the tension like a spotlight through darkness. "Darius! You made it!" Heads turned. Security straightened. The whispering guests fell into a sudden, uneasy stillness. From the far end of the ballroom, weaving through clusters of donors and corporate elites, came a man who seemed to pull the room's attention along with him, the CEO of Sapphire Ridge Fund. Silver hair, perfectly tailored suit, a posture shaped by years of commanding boardrooms. But the most striking thing was not who he was. It was how he approached Darius, not cautiously, not curiously, but with genuine excitement, like greeting someone vital, someone important. He reached the VIP platform and broke into a wide grin. "Darius, I was hoping you'd arrive early." The couple froze, the wife's face drained of color as if someone had tugged the rug of certainty from beneath her. The husband's mouth opened slightly, no words, just shock silently rearranging his confidence. Security stepped aside with immediate respect, suddenly aware they'd been inches from making a catastrophic mistake. The CEO extended his hand toward Darius, not casually, not politely, but with the unmistakable sincerity reserved for equals or superiors. Darius rose, shaking his hand with calm familiarity. The CEO laughed warmly, clapping Darius on the shoulder. "I've been waiting to introduce you to the board members personally. You're going to love the seating arrangement tonight." He glanced at the table, then the empty chair, then the tense posture of the couple hovering beside it. A subtle frown crossed his face. "Why aren't you seated yet?" he asked. The room tightened again, this time with a different energy, anticipation, curiosity, fear. Darius didn't speak. He simply turned slightly, gesturing toward the couple with the quiet dignity of a man who didn't need to explain what had happened. Their actions explained themselves. The CEO followed his gesture, and the truth began to settle on his expression. The wife's composure snapped first. She forced a laugh, thin, shaky, artificial. "Oh, this is such a misunderstanding," she stammered. "We thought we thought someone was sitting in the wrong seat. These events can be so confusing." Her husband nodded quickly, swallowing panic. "Yes, exactly. We were just helping maintain order. We didn't realize he was, with you." With you. As if Darius were an invited +1, as if his presence still needed justification. The CEO didn't smile. He didn't nod. He didn't reassure them. Instead, his eyes narrowed slowly, a man beginning to piece together a picture he didn't like. His gaze swept from them, to Darius, to the still hovering security officers. "Is that so?" he said quietly. The couple stumbled forward with overlapping explanations, their words tripping over each other. "We didn't mean any disrespect. We were only trying to help. It looks suspicious, you understand. We thought he didn't look like," but each attempt made the hole deeper, exposed their assumptions more clearly, wrapped their prejudice in thin excuses that fooled no one. The CEO raised a hand. They fell silent instantly. He turned back to Darius, not asking, but silently encouraging him to speak if he wished. Darius remained silent. Silence in that moment was louder than any accusation, and the room understood it. The CEO inhaled slowly, a flicker of disappointment passing through his expression, not aimed at Darius, but at the people who had made the mistake of underestimating him. The truth they were hiding was about to come out, and it would destroy them. For a moment, the ballroom existed in a strange, suspended silence, the kind that comes right before a truth too big to ignore finally lands. The CEO exhaled slowly, adjusting his suit jacket as if preparing to drop a weight that would change the trajectory of the room. His eyes swept over the couple, then the security officers, then the cluster of whispering guests pretending not to listen but hanging on every breath, and finally he spoke. "You're talking to our largest private investor." The words didn't just fall into the room, they detonated. The entire VIP section went still. Champagne flutes paused mid-air. The orchestra faltered, just for a beat, before scrambling back into rhythm. Photographers froze, cameras half raised, their fingers suspended above shutter buttons like they were afraid to interrupt the moment. A server carrying a tray of hors d'oeuvres nearly stumbled, catching themselves with wide, startled eyes. Even the flowers on the centerpiece seemed to stand straighter, as if the room itself understood the gravity of the reveal. The wife's face drained of color so fast it looked like her makeup evaporated. Her husband blinked rapidly, jaw trembling, his earlier arrogance collapsing into pure, unfiltered panic. Because in a single sentence, everything they believed, everything they assumed, everything they used to justify their outrage, shattered. The man they tried to remove, the man they mocked, the man they humiliated in front of dozens of elite guests, owned more of this event than they did, owned more of the company than they did, held more power than they could ever imagine. A soft murmur spread through the crowd, not surprise, but awe, and beneath that awe, shame. The wife attempted to recover first, plastering on a shaky smile that couldn't hide the crack of terror in her voice. "Oh, I didn't realize," she said, reaching toward Darius with trembling hands. "This was all a huge misunderstanding. I hope you know we didn't mean anything by it, truly." But her words spilled out with the desperation of someone trying to rewrite history while everyone silently watched the truth unfold. Her husband stepped forward next, swallowing hard before extending his hand toward Darius. "Well," he managed, forcing a hollow laugh, "I suppose we got off on the wrong foot. Let's just shake hands and forget the whole thing." Forget. The word hovered in the air like a plea for mercy, a plea for escape, a plea for the chance to erase their own behavior. But Darius didn't take the hand. He didn't flinch. He didn't retaliate. He simply offered a polite, almost gentle smile, one that held no malice, but no forgiveness either. Silence crawled across the VIP platform again, heavier than before. Guests shifted nervously, unsure whether to look at the couple or pretend they weren't witnessing the most humiliating moment of the evening. Servers stood frozen in doorways. Even the security officers avoided eye contact, now fully aware of how close they had come to escorting out the most important man in the room. The CEO stepped closer to Darius, voice lower, steadier, full of something between apology and respect. "Is everything all right here?" he asked. Though the question wasn't really a question, it was a reminder, to the couple, to the guests, to everyone who had been complicit in silence, of where true authority rested. The wife's throat bobbed. The husband's face glistened with stress. They weren't just embarrassed, they were exposed. But justice wasn't done yet. Darius had one more decision to make. The CEO motioned subtly toward the edge of the VIP platform, inviting Darius to step aside with him. It wasn't a command. It wasn't even a request. It was a gesture of respect, one leader acknowledging another. As they walked a few paces away, the murmurs softened behind them. The couple stood frozen in embarrassed stillness, caught between shame and terror. Guests pretended to return to conversations, though every ear strained to catch what would happen next. The CEO lowered his voice, careful to shield the moment from unnecessary attention. "Darius," he said, calm but tense, "you tell me how you want this handled. If you want consequences, you'll have them." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't vengeance. It was an offering, the kind extended only to someone with enough influence to determine the fate of others. For the first time that evening, Darius allowed himself to feel the weight of everything that had happened. The humiliation, the assumptions, the quiet cruelty disguised as etiquette, the room's silence when he needed someone to stand up. And beneath all of it, a small, sharp ember of anger he rarely allowed to rise. Was he angry? Of course. Was there pride in finally being acknowledged, finally being seen? Yes, undeniably. But most of all, there was something deeper, a desire for justice. Not the loud, vengeful kind, but justice wrapped in dignity, the kind that doesn't need shouting to make its point. Darius turned toward the couple. They were still trembling in their designer outfits, faces drawn tight with regret that arrived only after exposure, not introspection. Their downfall had been slow, public, and painfully deserved. He looked back at the CEO, his voice steady, almost gentle. "People like them shouldn't represent your brand." There was no malice, no hatred, just truth, clean, sharp, undeniable. The CEO's expression shifted. Relief. Agreement. Understanding. He nodded once, firmly. "I'll take care of it immediately." He didn't call security. He didn't raise his voice. He simply signaled discreetly to the event administrator standing near the back. A woman in a black blazer approached the couple with a polite but unmistakable authority. Her tone was soft, almost apologetic, but her message was absolute. "Mr. and Mrs. Weller, we need to speak to you privately. Please follow me." Humiliation was one thing, but being escorted out by administration, not security, meant something far more devastating. They weren't considered a threat. They weren't considered important. They were being removed, because they no longer represented the image the event wanted attached to its name. The couple's faces collapsed. Their world shrank to the walk toward the exit. Guests avoided their eyes, refusing to offer sympathy. The orchestra played on, but the melody now sounded like a soundtrack to their downfall. And Darius? He didn't watch them leave. He didn't smirk. He didn't gloat. He simply returned to his seat, the seat they swore he didn't deserve, and placed the name plaque gently in front of him. Guests stole glances, unsure how a man so wronged could remain so composed. The CEO watched him quietly, respect deepening in his eyes. But then, Darius did something unexpected, something that made the CEO straighten in surprise, something that shifted the energy of the room once more. But what Darius did next shocked even the CEO. Darius walked back toward the VIP table with the same steady confidence he'd entered the gala with, but now the room looked different. Not because the chandeliers dimmed or the music softened, but because every pair of eyes that once questioned him now followed him with a mixture of awe, guilt, and reverence. He wasn't just a guest anymore. He was the quiet storm they hadn't seen coming. The couple, escorted slowly across the ballroom by the event administrator, moved like people walking through a nightmare they couldn't wake from. Guests parted silently as they passed, not out of courtesy, but out of discomfort. Shame clung to them like a heavy coat, and then, just as they reached the edge of the hall, something made them turn. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was regret, maybe it was the desperate hope for forgiveness they had no right to expect. But whatever the reason, they looked back, and they found Darius already watching them. He sat in the very chair they'd tried to remove him from, back straight, hands resting lightly on the table, the gold name plaque gleaming in front of him like a quiet declaration of truth. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't call attention. He simply spoke, calm and clear enough for only them, and the silent witnesses nearby, to hear. "I was always in the right seat," he said. A pause, gentle but powerful. "You just didn't think I belonged there." The words hit harder than any public scolding. The couple's faces broke, not from anger, not from arguments they could no longer make, but from the crushing weight of seeing themselves clearly for the first time. Their expressions collapsed into a mixture of shame, regret, and the bitter understanding that their downfall had been authored by their own assumptions. They turned away quickly, unable to hold Darius's gaze any longer, and followed the administrator out of the ballroom. Doors closed behind them with a soft click that felt final, an ending to a story they'd thought they controlled. But the story wasn't theirs. It had never been. Moments like these expose who people are. Not through their wealth, not through their power, not through the seats they sit in, but through the dignity they either choose to give or choose to deny. As the room regained its rhythm, murmurs softening, conversations resuming, the orchestra rising again, Darius remained still, allowing the moment to settle. He hadn't embarrassed them. He hadn't yelled. He hadn't retaliated. He had simply revealed the truth. And, sometimes, truth is the most painful justice of all. Never judge a person by the seat they sit in. Judge them by the respect they give others. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story of justice, dignity, and real consequences, stay close. Your next powerful story begins in a moment.